Hello everyone, welcome to or back to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. Thank you for being here. Before I get into this video, by the title, I'm sure you already know that I'm going to be talking about eating disorders. Before I jump into the content, I did just want to say the reason why I haven't made this video is because I'm concerned that people are going to worry about me or look at me a certain way. My friends, my family, people who I see every day, people who are close to me watch my videos, and I just want to make it clear to them and to the viewer, all of you guys, that I am perfectly okay. And by talking about these things, it's actually very therapeutic for me, and I feel like I'm in a very good place now where I can openly talk about it without being triggered or anything like that. Today we are going to be talking about eating disorders and my eating disorder. So I've never actually said out loud on my channel that I struggled with an eating disorder. If you've been on my channel for a while, if you've watched any of my other videos on binge eating, anything like that, I used to identify my binge eating as disordered eating, even going so far in one video to say I don't think it's an eating disorder. Over time, however, as I've learned more about what I went through, as I learned more about what I had to overcome with my relationship with food, I've come to realize that I did have an eating disorder. And I honestly think that the reason why I had such trouble admitting it is just, it comes down to my personality type. If you know me, you know I am a bit of a control freak. I've always been like this. When I was in high school, grade 10, I was researching universities to go to. When I finally made it to university, my first year, I was looking at master's programs. Like, it's just how I am. I'm someone who likes control of my life. I want to know what I'm doing in 5 years, 10 years. So when I started dealing with an eating disorder, it just kind of shook me a bit. It shook me to my core because all of a sudden, I felt like I had no control over an aspect of my life that I felt like I should easily have control over. When we're talking about food and we're talking about food disorders, from the outside, as someone who doesn't understand them, it's easy to ask like, why don't you just eat? Or why don't you just stop eating? And that's kind of the view I had about it. At that time, I was very ashamed. I felt really bad about myself. And I think all that just fed into me rejecting the thought that I could have an eating disorder. So if you're new here, or you have no idea what I'm talking about, the eating disorder that I'm talking about is binge eating disorder. Like I said, I've talked about it on my channel, but if you're new to my channel, you may have never heard about it ever. Binge eating disorder in comparison to other eating disorders is, I would say, highly underrepresented. I also wanted to say, if you are watching this video and you don't really understand what I'm talking about, you can't really see it from my point of view, I just wanted to come on here and admit that I was once in that position. At one point in my life, I was very ignorant towards any type of mental or emotional disorder, and I hate admitting this because it paints me as so ignorant, and I was. Like, when I was younger, I was very ignorant to these types of issues people face. But when I was younger, before I dealt with any type of disorder, whether that be my anxiety, my eating, whatever, I would look at people who struggle with disorders, let's say anorexia or self-harm, and I would look at someone who wasn't eating and say, I don't get it, why don't you just eat? Or I would look at someone who was self-harming and say, I don't get it, why don't you just stop? It actually took me experiencing a disorder to understand that it doesn't matter how much you have your shit together, it doesn't matter how in control you are of your life. If you get a disorder, there is nothing you can do about it unless you actively work on changing it. At the height of my binge eating, it was probably the darkest part of my life. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know why I couldn't stop eating. And since there was so little discussion on the topic, I didn't realize how common it was for people to develop some type of binge eating disorder following massive weight loss or following restrictive dieting. And now, luckily, we have a lot of people in the community talking more openly and transparently about binge eating disorder. But I think there is still space to open dialogue on binge eating disorder and talk about it more in depth. And that's why I'm making this video. It is something that affected me every day for a very long time, and I just want to make this video to hopefully educate people, whether you think you have an eating disorder, whether you think a friend does, or whether you can't really see from the perspective of someone who does struggle. I'm hoping that this video can kind of fill that gap. So I'm sure a lot of you have noticed that a lot of eating disorder literature and discourse highly focuses on two main eating disorders. Those include anorexia and bulimia. Both are very serious and debilitating eating disorders, and I think they deserve all the recognition they get. I think that we need more research into the disorders, and I think we need more resources put towards helping those people. However, since we as a society have focused so heavily on these two eating disorders, it's kind of left every other eating disorder in the dust, to the point where a lot of people don't even realize these eating disorders exist. And that brings in the eating disorder that I struggled with, and that is binge eating disorder. I'm sure just by hearing it, you can kind of put into perspective what binge eating disorder is. Although we don't talk about the disorder that much, we talk about binge eating a lot, but the disorder is much more complex than just binge eating. The reason why I think binge eating disorder, or BED, I might refer to as BED, has been so neglected is because it is an eating disorder that has not been, glamorized, sensationalized, popularized by the media. Don't get me wrong, I don't think any eating disorder should be glamorized. All of them, like I said, are very debilitating, life ruining. I don't think they should be glamorized in any capacity. But when it comes to anorexia and bulimia, I would say the media, Hollywood, everything like that has done a very good job at equating those two disorders with thinness. And as a society that is obsessed with being thin, with losing weight, we have kind of pushed those two eating disorders to the front lines of the eating disorder conversation. So for those of you who do not know, anorexia is characterized by an obsessive desire to lose weight, most times to the point of not eating at all. Bulimia is the same in the sense that it stems from an unhealthy desire to lose weight, but it differs in the sense that food is consumed, and not just a little bit of food, a lot of food. So the two identifying components of bulimia are binging and purging. Binging meaning eating large quantities of food, most times to the point of feeling sick, and then purging meaning like purging that food from the body. There are two types of bulimia, purging and non-purging. Both, like I said, include like trying to undo the damage of eating so much food. Purging, however, means like physical purging, whether that's through self-induced vomiting or laxative abuse, while non-purging usually means like through excessive exercise, like literally spending 8-10 hours in the gym next day trying to undo the binging. I have mentioned on my channel before that I have struggled with exercise addiction. I, in my therapist, view what I struggled with separate from bulimia because my exercise addiction wasn't necessarily linked to my binge eating. I over-exercised every day, regardless of if I binged or not. Even if I was on track for 3 weeks straight, I was still hitting, 25,000 steps a day. So that's kind of where I vary in that aspect. I didn't exercise just because I binge ate. I exercised because I thought I had to every single day. But yeah, since anorexia and bulimia usually result in very few calories being processed through the body and also very inadequate nutrition, both disorders are usually associated with, like I said, thinness, so being thin. But then we have binge eating disorder. So if anorexia and bulimia are kind of sensationalized, glamorized because the output is usually being thin, where does that leave binge eating disorder? So binge eating disorder, for those of you who do not know, is characterized by recurrent episodes of eating large quantities of food, and sometimes the portions are so large that it is quite dangerous. What separates binge eating from bulimia is the purging aspect. The binging aspect of bulimia is something that a lot of people often overlook. When we think of bulimia, the first thing that comes to mind is the purging, but you cannot have bulimia without the binging aspect. Bulimia includes binging and purging, while binge eating disorder only includes binge eating. So since people with BED don't purge their calories, the outcome is usually weight gain. And this is kind of where we actually see the emergence of very toxic dialogue when we refer to eating disorders. Since BED often results in weight gain and bulimia often results in weight loss, bulimia is identified as an eating disorder because of rapid weight loss, while binge eating, on the other hand, is often written off as just plain laziness, lack of self-control, overconsumption, everything like that. Since we've been so adamant about, connecting thinness with eating disorders, a lot of people who struggle with binge eating disorder do not get the help they need because they are just told that they're lazy or that they have no self-control. When really, just like in bulimia, where there is the binging aspect, there's the binging aspect in BED as well. It kind of begs the question, how come when binging is followed by purging, it's viewed as a disorder, but when the binging, is on its own, it's not? And like I said, since there is such a lack of knowledge about binge eating disorder, a lot of people who struggle with it don't even know they struggle with it because they think they're just lazy or they think they just lack self-control. And yes, an element of binge eating disorder is lack of self-control because obviously you're binging on food you don't want to, but however, it is much, much, much deeper than that. I have very strong self-control, but at the height of my binge eating, there was absolutely fucking nothing I could do. And I'm gonna try to remember to talk about this more in depth later, but I just wanted to say right now, in case people click off before, when I say there was nothing I can do, that's what I thought. There is always something you can do if you have an eating disorder, and I really encourage you to talk to someone to get professional help because you do not have to live with an eating disorder. All right, so what causes binge eating disorder? There are a bunch of reasons why someone could develop binge eating disorder. I'm just going to talk about my own experience because it is not my job to diagnose you. It is not my job, it's just not my job. I'm not a professional. I'm just talking about my own experience. So for me, I highly associate my BED with restrictive dieting. So as a lot of you know, I lost 135 pounds, and during that time, I restricted my calories too heavily for too long. This is why I am so adamant about promoting healthy and sustainable weight loss. Because of restrictive dieting, not only did I develop an eating disorder, but I struggle with things that I should not have to struggle with. I'm anemic, I have a dysfunctional gallbladder, I have painful bloating, I have intolerance to fatty foods, I have IBS, I lost half my hair, and I'm not telling you that to scare you, I'm telling you that to warn you and to hopefully encourage you to lose weight in a healthy and sustainable way. A lot of eating disorder professionals often point to restrictive dieting as a cause of binge eating. Basically what restrictive dieting means is you're just eating way below the amount your body needs to properly function, and after a while your body just cannot maintain that few calories. Your mind just takes complete control of you, your body, your self-control, and it fills that absence of all those calories with calories. And that's kind of when you have these uncontrollable binges to eat. Binges vary per person. Sometimes I would have a binge of 2,000 calories. Sometimes I would binge eat well over 10,000 calories. So binge eating disorder can also be a result of yo-yo dieting, not having routine, consistency, sustainability. It can be a rebound of anorexia. Basically anyone who has a long history of sustained restriction is susceptible to developing binge eating disorder. B.E.D can also be linked to trauma as a kid, emotional eating, food scarcity, for example, being a young child who wasn't fed enough because your family couldn't afford it, and then as a result, as an adult, they binge eat. Maybe you were exposed to dieting at a young age. Maybe your mom put you on a diet to lose weight when you were a kid. All those reasons are well-documented contributors to developing binge eating disorder. In my experience, I have dealt with two different types of binges. One is planned and one is unplanned. What I mean by this is at the height of my eating disorder, I would plan binges. So for example, it could be a Monday, then I would have that binging urge and I would say, you're pushing it off all week and you can binge on Friday. And then all week I would fixate and wait for Friday. I would write notes in my app being like, what am I going to binge eat on? What restaurants am I going to go to? And it was such a weird relationship I was developing, because you would think if I planned it for a week later, I would be able to overcome the urge within that week, but I couldn't. I would just fixate on it and the urge would become bigger and bigger and bigger. And then unplanned binges would be, for example, if I didn't plan on having that binge. Let's say I went out to dinner with a friend and then I ate something that triggered me and I went home and just binge ate everything. And that was a very recurring theme in my life. Sometimes I would eat something that was off track or something that I didn't plan on eating or something that was more calorically dense than I had anticipated, and that would just set me off the deep end. I would be like, fuck it, I already fucked up, I'm gonna eat everything in sight. And that is something that happened to me a lot. And honestly, I really don't know how to emphasize the fact that although I was aware that this was happening, I felt like I could not control it. And that is something that I think a lot of people have trouble understanding, is that lack of control when you deal with an eating disorder. Because like I said, my ignorance when I was younger, if I did not deal with this, I could see why someone could look at someone with binge eating disorder and say, just stop fucking eating. But it's not that easy. When you deal with something this severe, you can't just stop. And honestly, it just blows my mind that people think that I have the choice, because if I had the choice, I would have stopped. I wasted hundreds, even thousands of dollars on food to binge on. The mental strain it caused me, the way it affected my friendships, if I could have stopped, I would have. But like I said, you can stop if you seek help. Please seek help. I really do think that we've just come to the point where being fat is so heavily associated with being lazy that no one wants to admit that binge eating disorder is a thing. I can tell you that at the height of my binge eating, I was walking 25,000 steps a day and still fucking eating. I was anything but lazy at that point in my life. I can proudly say now that I no longer binge eat. I know a lot of you guys know that. It's been almost 300 days since I had a binge. And honestly, I equate a lot of my success to openly talking about it, especially here on my YouTube channel. And just kind of doing what I needed to do to educate myself on the disorder. I do feel recovered. However, I honestly do not think I will have a completely normal relationship with food. I struggled with binge eating disorder after losing weight, just like I struggled with food addiction prior to losing weight. I have never in my life had a normal relationship with food. And while I do feel recovered and that I don't have the urge to binge eat anymore, it is still something I think about every single day. The main difference is I don't act on it. And honestly, that is enough. If you have struggled with an eating disorder, you know that not acting on your urges is enough. I also want to make it very clear that I'm not saying that every overweight or obese person has an eating disorder. That is a very important point to make. If you are watching this and you are overweight, I don't want you to automatically assume you have an eating disorder. If you have uncontrollable urges to eat, even though deep down you know you do not want to eat that food, that is a big sign. But if you're just snacking, if you just struggle with self-control, it is very different. Eating an extra 200 calories of chips because you were snacky, it's just not the same as eating 2,000 calories at 10 p.m. because you couldn't control it. All right, so I wanted to end this video talking a little bit of B.E.D recovery. I am a bit hesitant to include this, part in this video because I know it's probably gonna ruffle a few feathers. It is an opinion, it's an unpopular opinion, really, is what it is. But I think it's an opinion that needs to be shared because I'm seeing some very unhealthy and toxic messaging sent to people who struggle with binge eating disorder and food addiction. Eating disorder recovery dialogue has largely focused on anorexia and bulimia. And while, like I said, while I think it is so fucking great that we have been able to develop methods to help people who struggle with those eating disorders, it just doesn't apply to binge eating disorder in most cases. Like I said, not a doctor. If it works, if those methods work for you, very happy for you. But from the people I know and from what I've experienced, those things did not work for me. So the main thing that I'm talking about, and something I'm sure a lot of you have heard about, is intuitive eating. Like I said, intuitive eating is great if you can actually do it. But if we're talking about someone like me, so someone who struggled with food addiction and then binge eating, it is not constructive to tell someone like that to eat until they're satisfied. And the reason why it's not constructive is because people who struggle with food addiction, people who eat until they're pain, don't know when they're satisfied. So for me, I have lived my whole life with a disordered relationship with food, and even to this day, I have trouble identifying my hunger cues. I have to stop myself from eating because if I don't, I will overconsume. And stopping yourself from eating isn't always restrictive if the person who is being stopped is literally programmed to eat too much. Because while I know a lot of people disagree with me, you can eat too much. When I struggled with binge eating disorder, I was full when I was literally in pain and I could not eat anymore. So for me, what I had to do to overcome my eating disorder was to actually do the complete opposite of intuitive eating, which was educating myself on how many calories I needed to eat and what macros I needed to hit. Because when I was binge eating, I didn't realize how much damage I was doing to my body. And prior to binge eating, I was restricting so heavily, I was never able to develop the knowledge I needed to actually understand what my body needed. But yeah, guys, so that is my little spiel. I know it was not little. I'm sorry this video was so fucking long. I just really wanted to put my experience, put some information out on the internet about this topic. Like I said, if you think you are struggling with an eating disorder, please seek help. I have no idea how therapeutic it can be to just talk to someone about what issue you're facing. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really hope I did not piss anyone off, but I'm sure if I did, I'll see it in the comments. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in my next video.